We all make mistakes in the garden, right? But some slip-ups are more impactful than others. Today, I'm getting really honest about my 3 biggest gardening regrets, the "what was I thinking" moments that, looking back, were actually incredibly valuable lessons. Learn from my missteps and fast-track your way to a more successful and satisfying harvest. Regret number 1, the cost of impatience. If I could go back and, shake my younger gardening self, it would be about my relationship with time. Patience, as they say, is a virtue, and nowhere is this more true than in gardening. My impatience cost me countless harvests, wasted money, and frankly, a lot of heartbreak watching promising plants fail. My first major mistake was rushing into planting cool season crops way too late in spring. Picture this, it's May, the weather's gorgeous, and I'm practically vibrating with excitement to get my lettuce, spinach, and radishes in the ground. What I didn't understand then was that these crops need consistently cool temperatures to develop properly. By planting them when soil temperatures were already climbing into the 70s, I was setting them up for disaster. The result? Every single one of those beautiful lettuce varieties I'd carefully selected bolted within weeks. Instead of tender, sweet leaves, I got bitter, woody stems shooting skyward faster than I could harvest. My spinach turned into a science experiment of premature flowering, and those radishes? They were so spicy they could have cleared sinuses from across the yard. I learned the hard way that timing isn't just important in gardening, it's everything. Then there was my seedling situation. Oh, the carnage I caused with my watering can. I was so eager to help my little plants grow that I showered them with water daily, sometimes even twice a day. I thought more water meant more love, more growth, more success. Instead, I created a fungal paradise. Damping off became my nemesis. I'd wake up excited to check on my seedlings, only to find them collapsed at the soil line like tiny plant zombies. Root rot followed closely behind, turning what should have been white, healthy root systems into brown, mushy disasters. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was literally loving my plants to death. Learning to water deeply but less frequently, and understanding that seedlings need air around their roots as much as they need moisture, was a game changer that took me embarrassingly long to figure out. My third patience-related disaster involved perennial edibles. I planted asparagus, fruit trees, and berry bushes expecting immediate gratification. When my asparagus spears were pencil thin in year 2, when my apple tree produced exactly 3 apples in its 3rd season, I was ready to rip everything out and start over. I didn't understand that perennials are playing the long game. They're investing energy in root development and establishing themselves for decades of production. The asparagus that disappointed me so much in year 2, by year 4, it was producing thick, tender spears that made store-bought varieties taste like cardboard. Those berry bushes I almost gave up on, they're now the crown jewels of my garden, producing buckets of fruit every season. Patience with perennials isn't just recommended, it's mandatory for success. Regret number 2, underestimating the elements. My second major regret revolves around my complete underestimation of how much the elements, sun, wind, water, and soil conditions, would impact my garden's success. I approached gardening like I was arranging furniture in a room, not working with living systems that depend entirely on their environment. I'll never forget my tomato disaster of 2018. I had this beautiful spot in my yard that got morning sun and was protected from the harsh afternoon heat. It seemed perfect, until I realized my tomatoes were becoming tall, spindly shadows of their former selves. They reached desperately toward any available light, developing weak stems and producing maybe a handful of small, pale fruits all season. What I learned too late was that partial shade and full sun aren't suggestions in gardening, they're requirements. Sun-loving vegetables like tomatoes, peppers, and squash need a minimum of 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight to photosynthesize effectively and produce the energy needed for fruit development. My partially shaded tomatoes were essentially starving, using all their energy to reach for light instead of producing the harvest I was dreaming of. The lesson extended beyond just tomatoes. I had to completely rethink my garden layout, moving sunlovers to the brightest spots and relegating shade-tolerant crops like leafy greens to the areas with less direct light. It was a humbling reminder that plants have specific needs that can't be negotiated away, no matter how much I wanted that perfect garden layout. Wind was something I barely considered until it started snapping my plants like toothpicks. I live in an area with strong seasonal winds, but I was so focused on sun and water that I completely ignored this crucial factor. My tall tomato plants heavy with fruit would snap at the base during windstorms. My carefully constructed pea trellises became twisted metal sculptures after a particularly blustery week. The wake-up call came when I lost an entire row of corn stalks that were nearly ready to harvest, to what wasn't even considered a severe windstorm by local standards. That's when I realized wind protection isn't optional in many climates, so I started incorporating windbreaks into my garden design, using everything from strategic shrub plantings to temporary barriers during vulnerable growing periods. Learning to work with wind rather than against it really transformed my garden. I began choosing shorter, stockier varieties of plants that are prone to wind damage, and I invested in proper staking and support systems that could flex with gusts rather than break. The difference was remarkable. My plants looked healthier, produced better, and I stopped losing entire harvests to weather events I should have anticipated. Perhaps my most expensive lesson involved soil drainage, or rather my complete ignorance of it. I chose a low-lying area of my yard for a large vegetable bed because it stayed moist and looked fertile. What I didn't realize was that moist and waterlogged are two very different things. After the first major rainstorm, my beautiful raised beds became miniature lakes. Plants that had been thriving suddenly started showing signs of distress. Leaves' yellowed growth slowed and I started noticing that distinctive smell of anaerobic soil. Basically, my plants' roots were suffocating in waterlogged conditions. The root rot that followed was honestly just devastating. I lost entire plantings of beans, carrots, and even supposedly hardy brassicas. What I learned was that proper drainage isn't just about preventing standing water. It's really about making sure oxygen can reach plant roots, which is absolutely essential for healthy growth. I ended up having to install drainage systems and completely rebuild my beds with better soil structure, a costly mistake that, could have been avoided with some basic soil testing and observation. Regret number 3. The lure of too good to be true. My third and perhaps most costly regret involves falling for gardening promises that just seemed too good to be true, because, well, they usually were. Whether it was miracle plants, magic fertilizers, or oversimplified growing methods, I learned that sustainable gardening success comes from understanding principles, not chasing shortcuts. Social media and gardening catalogs are dangerous places for impressionable gardeners like my former self. I became obsessed with growing exotic, Instagram-worthy plants that promised incredible yields and unique flavors. Dragon fruit, expensive heirloom varieties from completely different climate zones, trendy superfoods that looked amazing in photos. I tried them all. The reality was, well, pretty harsh. That dragon fruit cactus I spent a fortune on, it actually needs consistently warm temperatures and high humidity, stuff my climate just couldn't provide, even with all the protection I tried. And those gorgeous purple carrots from a Mediterranean seed company, they were bred for totally different soil and weather conditions, and honestly, they performed terribly in my garden. I learned that successful gardening really starts with understanding your specific growing conditions, like your hardiness zone, average rainfall, soil type, and seasonal patterns, and then choosing plants that thrive in those conditions. The most exotic plant in the world is, well, pretty much worthless if it can't survive in your backyard. Now, I research extensively before trying any new varieties, focusing on those that are specifically bred for or proven successful in my region. These costly mistakes taught me that successful gardening is built on patience, observation, and respect for natural systems. Every failure honestly became a teacher, and every dead plant was a lesson in humility and perseverance. The garden that emerged from these regrets is more resilient, productive, and personally satisfying than anything I could have imagined when I started. So remember to subscribe to Smart Garden for more honest gardening advice and share this guide with fellow gardeners who might benefit from learning from my mistakes instead of making their own. Your garden, and, yeah, your wallet, will thank you for it.